Hey everyone, this is Corey with Stafford ZDC, and today I'm going to be giving you my full review on the Bestech knives Nuke. So I'm going to try and approach this review in a slightly different way than normal. I'm not so much going to give you specs or anything. I will still do my size comparison here, which I will bring in with the Benchmade bug out and the 84mm Victorinox Cadet. But what I want to do is I just want to kind of talk about my experience with this knife while in comparison to how I just generally approach EDC and what my kind of cutting tasks are like. So let's start off with just some looks at the knife itself and what I like about this and what I dislike. I do like the finishing that is done on this. I love a sandblasted or a glass blasted frame. That matte kind of look to titanium is one of my favorite finishes. That's of course just a personal touch, but I do really enjoy that, and it's just to my taste. Next thing is these inlays. They're not my favorite thing, but there were some variety options available. This is just what was sent around to the Black Widow Passaround Group, so Bestech provided this one with the green and black G10 inlays. So, not necessarily the colors that I would choose. There are some others available, as I just said. But yeah, kind of neat looking, just not my cup of tea. Someone who likes green and black, though, that really might be your thing. The brass collars are a nice accent. They do give it some extra color, which I do like. I do like a pivot collar, not all the time, but it's nice to see on certain knives. Another one that I really love a pivot collar on is my Trevor Berger knives LEXK. The blue really adds some contrast with the natural micarta there. And same in the way that this brass kind of color really brings in a little bit of contrast to the green, black, and the gray from the titanium frame. Now let's talk about the blade a little bit. The blade is really nice shape-wise. I like this blade shape. You get some nice belly. The tip is still pretty low down. You can see it's not in line with the pivot. It's lower than the pivot, which means it's really nice and easy to get down, especially with the shape of the handle, to really use that point for kind of whatever you need. And that makes this a really nice utilitarian blade shape. You get a lot of this front cutting edge, gets a lot of good use, and it does come to a very fine point, which hopefully this will focus. You can see that. It's not a super acute or anything, but it is nice and fine and is very pokey, and the edge terminates pretty thinly across the entire edge here. It's going to be tough to kind of see. I never find a good angle to do this, but it is a full flat grind, and it does come down to a pretty thin edge that does cut nicely. This had really no issues going through cardboard or anything like that, and certainly no issues up there at the tip where it thins out even more. Now, something about this blade that I don't really like, and something worth noting, is the inner edges of this opening hole. They are a little bit on the sharp side. You can see that there is some beveling done in there, but that comes down to its own 90-degree angle on the inside, so it does kind of catch you a little bit. There's no good way to really show this, but yeah, here's probably the best angle of it. You can see the initial edge here is chamfered, but it's still kind of sharp. There's no rounding done to this. It's a satin going in this direction on this area. So it's kind of a sharp angle as well as the one on the inside. So if you're not careful about it, you can kind of scrape your fingernail on it. If that's a concern of yours, I'll see if I can, wiggling my fingernail back and forth. There's not much of a mark, but there's a little bit going on right there. Just something that with the meat of your finger, you do kind of notice it's a little sharp. But nothing too bad, just kind of wish that edge was knocked down more. It's not very comfortable at all for the thumb. Coming up into this area, you only have that frame to glide against, so it is a kind of a 90-degree edge to push against. And you can see how it's kind of flattening my thumb, and even leaving a very small little dent, which is going to be tough to see, but right in front of my finger there. Something that's just not the most comfortable, but certainly some people might have no issue with it. I just feel like it is worth noting. Now, another thing I do like about this knife is ergonomics. This is fine when cutting with it, especially in this kind of a saber grip. The blade is a little bit narrow with this finger choil, Just you have this angle here coming in. Like this portion of the cut here, kind of the relief, really should be continued through here. That would have been a much better placement, but instead it's kind of set up to like pinch grip like this, as if you were going to use this for like food prep, which I mean, like you could do, but your knuckles are still kind of in the way. You know, you're not going to be getting a whole lot of clearance to a cutting board, but you could do it. I didn't do any food prep with this knife, but that's kind of how these chamfers here are cut, when they should be further down, just to kind of increase the comfort here. I do find that because of the frame being so wide at this point and having no narrowing, I do get some of this these 90-degree angles into my finger, and it's not quite the most comfortable thing. The best case being out in this front knuckle here, which I was covering with the blade. That's kind of the more comfortable way to hold this, in my opinion, but it's still a little bit sharp up there. Nothing too bad though, and the flipper actually is not causing me any ergonomic issues against my middle finger. It's actually appropriately sized and rounded off nicely here, which is really nice to see. And I know I didn't mention it yet, but this is an M390 steel, which you can see the marking hiding underneath the shadow right there. So M390 steel, nice to see. This is close to $300. It was like $287 or something like that. I looked it up the first time I tried to film this video before deciding to put it down, give it a week or so additional time, and then come back to it. Now, in my unboxing, kind of let's address the elephant in the room here. The biggest thing I don't like about this knife is the detent. It's just too weak for this flipper tab, in a sense that if you're just going to try and break the detent, it's not going anywhere. And I was kind of hoping that this was going to be one of those knives that you just kind of pull on the flipper tab and it deploys with no issue. And it did deploy there, but most of the time, if you're not thinking about it intentionally, it's not deploying. And I'm not putting any pressure on the lock bar. I'll show you holding it like this on the clip. You can see it still fails. But with any amount of intention to open this, it does get just enough to come out. And what I did find is that I was using kind of a light switch motion, which if you haven't heard that before, it just refers to kind of flicking down and like this to flip a knife. That's kind of a light switch motion. And then there's the push button, which kind of looks like this, which you can see it almost deployed there. My finger got in the way, where you're just kind of pushing into the knife. And I found that if you come at the top angle like this and do a push button, it deploys pretty reliably. And that being said, of course, the flick and the thumb flick are both fine for deployment. The detent is certainly strong enough for those applications, just not great on the flipper tab unless you kind of do an aggressive push button or a very intentional light switch type of motion. That certainly does work, but it's not the best feeling. Action on the close is nice. There's really no issue here. The flipper tab stops it from coming all the way down to your finger, and it shakes shut nicely. It is on bearings, so it is nice and fairly smooth. Like I said, no real complaints about the closing action. Just wish that detent was a little bit stronger. I think the lock bar pressure is fine. And yeah, that's about my biggest gripe with this knife, is that there was those 90-degree angles, and then just the detent isn't strong enough. It's certainly a functional detent, just not what I like out of a flipper. I mean, too stiff sucks for a flipper. It's not something that anyone really enjoys, trying to force a knife to open from some little protruding piece of steel. But a little more effort would go a long way in making this knife feel a lot better, at least on the opening. But overall, I mean, it's a neat little piece. This is a small knife, as you saw in the size comparison. You know, it kind of punches larger than it looks, or it feels larger than it is, I think is a good way to put it. To bring back the bug out in here, you can see they're actually pretty closely proportioned. The blade, of course, is shorter on the Bestech, and so is the handle. But I mean, in hand, due to the finger choil, you're talking about a 4-finger grip on the bug out, just barely for me. Just kind of fits right into my hand. And sorry, I know this camera's a little bit close today. just kind of the nature of how I set things up. But using that choil, you can see I have a meaningful amount of grip area, and even maybe a little more than the bug out, not by much, but just slightly, or if not the same, for a smaller overall knife. And like I said, you do sacrifice some cutting edge and some blade, of course, but this cutting edge, being close to 3 inches, it's not quite. I don't have the specs brought up, as I said. It's plenty of cutting edge. You're not going to need a whole lot more, and the blade length is pretty much fine. It's about a 3-inch blade, so I don't really have any complaints there. Yeah, that's really where I'm kind of landing with this knife, is that it's okay. You know, I don't have many bad things to say about it, and those bad things can be addressed pretty readily. Increasing some of that lock bar tension would increase the detent. That's something that could be easily done by someone who modifies knives, or even just Bestech in general. They could stiffen the detent on these a little bit. And as for like some ergo stuff with the choil, just rounding off some of these edges, and if they did a stonewash blade, all those problems would be solved. You'd have no issue in this area, and no issues down here either, because those edges would just be softened a little bit. You know, they'd still look nice, but they just wouldn't be so hard and at 90 degrees or so. Yeah, I guess that's where I'm going to leave this one. I know I said this is a little bit different, kind of a rambly, unstructured review here. So please let me know your thoughts on that in the comments, because I don't know how I feel about it. It certainly isn't as easy to collect my thoughts on stuff, just kind of going on and on about things and moving from one thing to the next. But I've never really had a super structured style to my reviews anyway. So let me know what you think. If you like seeing the specs and hearing them, well, I guess just hearing them. I don't really put them on screen or anything. And all that. Just, yeah, let me know. Let me know what your preference is. And that's going to be it for me today. So Bestech Nuke, it's an interesting knife. If you like the design and you don't care that it's, $300 or whatever, go for it. Go enjoy it. It'll be a good knife for you. It's not the knife for me. I certainly won't be picking one of these up, but I have other things to fill this kind of a role. So that's mostly the reason why. All right, finally, I'll let you guys go. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.